Okay, welcome to the live stream for August 15th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome. If you are returning here, welcome. Hi, Kitty. Welcome. So hi, up yours, Narc, Ellie, Deborah. Welcome, welcome. So we are going to do things a little different. We're going to try something new tonight. And what we are going to do is I am going to start with a list that I made, 8 things that we can do to improve our mental health. And so for the first hour of the live stream, I thought it would be beneficial. So here's the plan, is I'm thinking that for the first hour of all of the live streams, I really would like for us to focus on the thriving part, the making our lives wonderful. And so just kind of the discussion about everything like boundaries and standards and moving forward and sharing our wins and just kind of everything positive. So, and then the last 2 hours, we'll do Q&A and about anything else. So for the first hour, I'll start off with some sort of like article or topic or something like that. And then if you guys have questions about that, if you have comments about that, post it in the chat. And I have a friend who's going to be in here tonight. And so she's going to be texting me different questions during the first hour that she sees in the chat, so I don't miss anything, because it's hard for me to read and think and talk all at the same time. So she's going to be texting me questions that pertain to the topic of tonight, which is going to be improving our mental health. So if you have any questions about that topic, feel free to add them in the chat, and we'll see how it goes. Up yours, Narc says, that's a great idea, Dana. Focusing on the thriving part will be very helpful. Yes, I think so. There's so many people out there that are at, various stages of healing and understanding. And I think it's so important. Angie and I did an interview with Tracy, this gal Tracy, last week. And we were talking about healing and kind of the next, and Richard was there too, and in the next steps of all of this. And I think we got to talking about just the awareness that your life, you could do so much more than just heal from this. Like you can actually move forward and put the pieces back, the pieces of you and the pieces of your life back in a whole new and wonderful and empowered way, and that your life can be even better than before. So that's the whole purpose really of my channel, is the thrive after abuse. And, the live streams up until this point, I guess I didn't have really any expectation or intention for them. I just wanted to be able to provide a place for people to come and just ask questions and discuss whatever was on their mind. But I've been getting feedback from people that were like, Dana, please make it a little bit more directed. Please, let's talk more about the thriving. So I thought we'll combine the two and we'll just go from there. So that is what we New Chris says, Dana, that microphone. He says, Dana FM, you're listening to the Narcissism Hour, and this is Money Can't Buy Me Love. I know, right? I do. I totally feel like a DJ or something. So, okay. So for the first hour, if you guys are new here, we're going to do things a little bit different tonight. If you have any questions that pertain to narcissism, abuse, the understanding part of it, we're going to cover all of that starting, let's say at 9:30. So like in an hour. But the first hour, we're really going to try to dedicate to us and the thriving part and the what now and picking up the pieces. So let me go ahead and read this article, this little thing that I wrote. And we'll start with this. And my friend is texting me questions to answer as we speak. Okay, so 8 things to improve your mental health. Number 1, self-love is synonymous with treating yourself with value. If you treat your health, energy, emotions, and time with value, it's amazing how many other things in your life will start to fall into place. This was a big aha moment for me, and I think for a lot of other people too, because so oftentimes we think of self-love as liking what we see in the mirror or not hating ourselves. And it's so much more than that. It's really loving ourselves so much that we protect ourselves and that we value ourselves and that we treat ourselves with dignity and respect, and not just ourselves, but every aspect of ourselves, our energy, our time, our body, our emotions, our physical space, all of that. And so when you really start getting used to treating your whole life, like your whole being, with value, everything starts to change. And all of the stress and the mental anguish and the negativity and all of that just kind of tends to crumble away because you're crowding it out. You're crowding it out with everything that you're just valuing yourself. You're valuing your sanity, your safety, and everything. It's powerful. It's a powerful practice, something that's worthy of doing pretty much throughout every moment of every day. And it does get easier with practice. Okay, so number 2, keep peace in your life. Deal with issues as they arise or as soon after as you possibly can. This is so that resentment and anger don't build up. And this goes back to having that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication that we so often talk about, not only with other people, but with ourselves. And so being really honest, being honest with ourselves, if something is bothering you, to be honest with yourself and to really get solutions oriented about, okay, what needs to really be done about this? So, and again, all of these things take practice, but you don't need to do them 100% in order to see a radical transformation in your life. Sometimes even a 5%, positive difference in your life, you kind of move that trajectory out and you're at a very different place in 6 weeks or 6 months from now. Okay, point number 3, no more crazy makers. So if a person's behavior is causing you perpetual confusion, mental anguish, ongoing frustration, or if you have to walk on eggshells to not upset them out of fear of what they might do, there is a problem. Life is too short to have energy vampires in your life. Your safety and sanity matter. And, I've talked before about tightening up my boundaries. I thought I had healthy boundaries before, but the reality was they still needed quite a bit of work. And I was in the mindset where I thought, I really need concrete proof that a person is in fact problematic. And so I glossed over a lot of crazy making, perpetually confusing behavior. And that was such a big realization for me because I realized I needed to tighten things up. That kind of stuff, I don't need for a person's behavior to escalate. If I really value my safety and my sanity, especially, and I value having peace in my life, then crazy making and perpetually confusing behavior needs to really be a deal breaker. It either needs to be addressed and resolved, or it needs to be a deal breaker. Life is just too short to always be questioning somebody else's intentions and motivations and wondering, why are they acting squirrely, and do they mean to be mean to me, or do they mean to be manipulative, and all of that. Like, gravitate towards peace in your life by getting rid of the crazy makers. Okay, number 4, audit your inner circle. Keep people in your inner circle based on how nourishing and empowering they are, not based on how long you've known them, if they are family, how much you have in common with them, or how you feel about them. So what I mean by this is so many people, myself included, will say, oh, but I really like this person. I love this person. I'm just so torn. But if their behavior is dangerous or destructive or deadly, especially towards you or those people around you, then it's time that we really need to consider distancing ourselves from that person. So keeping people in our inner circle based on how they treat us, which really needs to be dignity and respect. And of course, it's a two-way street, right? We would be giving the same to them. but treating you with dignity and respect. They're nourishing and empowering to you. And this doesn't mean that they tell you everything that you want to hear. I have people ask me this often. They'll say like, well, what about honesty? And what about people that tell you some hard truths? I think it's valuable. There's a saying out there that says, mean what you say, but don't say it mean. So I value people in my life that give me constructive feedback, and that we can have that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication with. If somebody is giving me a bunch of unwanted advice, or they're quote unquote brutal honesty, or if they're just being mean, or if they're telling me all the reasons why my goals and dreams won't work, like I just don't have room in my life for that. It's not worth it. It's too draining. Number 5, take time to get to know yourself. What do you like? What do you dislike? What nourishes you? What drains your energy? Really getting clear on that, because here's the thing, the more clarity you can get about who you are and what juices you, the easier it's going to be for you to set boundaries. If we don't have a solid sense of kind of who we are and what we want and what even feels nourishing and what feels toxic, it's going to be difficult for us to set boundaries. If we're always thinking that other people must have good intentions, or we must have taken that the wrong way, or we must have heard them wrong, or what have you, if we're not in tune with ourselves and we're always giving other people the benefit of the doubt, we're really giving away our power. So it's really important that you're in tune enough with yourself to know, hey, you know what? This is perpetually confusing, or this is crazy making, or yes, this totally juices me. Like I love whatever it is that you might love. You might love painting or cooking or working on a car or playing poker or whatever it might be for you. So just really getting in tune with like what makes you you and what do you really enjoy. Okay. Number 6, know what is right about you. Ask yourself, what are 5 things that you like about yourself? What are 3 of your biggest strengths? If you were to meet yourself, what would you like about you? And doing that kind of honest inventory. Angie and I, this was another part of our conversation. I think it was last week, talking about some of our strengths. And she had mentioned that one of hers is that she really thinks outside the box. Like she's a creative thinker. I think that was a great response, because that really does. I would agree with her. Like that makes her her. And so I was kind of at a loss, because I was struggling with like, well, I don't like, what are some of my strengths? And I realized kind of during that live stream that, you know what, I am determined. Like I'm determined enough to continually fail at something and continually make a bunch of mistakes until I gain a level of proficiency at it. Like I will just keep at something if I'm really interested in it. So asking yourself, what are some strengths that you have? Everybody's got different strengths. So it's worth doing some self-examination there. Number 7, live an authentic life. This is such a cliche. I know it's so thrown around, but it's so true. And what that really means is being in your truth. So saying yes when you mean yes, saying no when you mean no, doing more of what nourishes you, doing less of what drains you, owning your truth, good, bad, or indifferent, like owning your past, owning your present, owning your plans for the future, and just being unapologetically you in a healthy, empowered way. Number 8, know your limits. The difference between giving care to others and taking care of others has to do with developing healthy boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set limits. It's okay to ask for help. Sinking yourself to save someone else isn't compassionate. It's self-destructive. So this is a big one. And this just all of these things really intertwine. So if you're really in tune with yourself and your feelings, and you can identify when when you're overgiving, when a boundary has been crossed for you, when you're crossing your own boundaries and you're saying yes when you really mean no, when you're overextending yourself and you're finding yourself frustrated and resentful and exhausted and all of that. Like, these are all signs that you're giving too much and that you're saying yes when you mean no, and to start kind of pulling things back a little bit and really getting more in alignment about honoring your time and your energy and your emotions and your body. Like, we can only do so much in a given day. So that is my list of 8 things that you can do to improve your mental health starting today. So let's go back to the chat. Marie says, yes, authenticity is important and empowering. And you know what, too, with authenticity is it makes your life so much easier. It's just so much easier because then other people around you, too, know that when you say yes, you mean yes. And when you say no, you mean no. Like, there's no hard feelings and resentments, and these kinds of things don't build up. Because what was it? Back to point number where is it? Dealing with resentments. Number 2, keeping peace in your life. So if you're dealing with issues as they arise and you're letting people know, like, hey, I can't do this, but I can't, I don't know, watch your children for 6 hours on Saturday, but boy, I would love to watch them for 3 hours while you go see a movie. Like, I could do that comfortably. Like, that would be enjoyable for me, where you're not doing it out of guilt or obligation, but you're doing it because it's enjoyable. And then, do you see what I'm saying? So, like, kind of going back and forth in every single aspect with your boss. If your boss asks you to work late or work on a weekend or work through lunch or do twice the work with the same pay, just letting them know, hey, I understand we're short staffed, or I understand this is what's going on. I really enjoy working here. This is kind of what would work for me. Like, let's make this a win-win situation. And when people move towards win-win, life is just so much easier. Okay, let's see. Yes, Nora's mom says you will also know if someone is unhealthy and problematic based on how you feel. Absolutely. And this is something that we've talked about in the past as well, with trying to figure out, but how do we know for sure? How do we know if they really are toxic, or if it's maybe it's a result of our PTSD or our previous experiences with this kind of stuff? Like, maybe it's us. And I think that kind of thinking stems from this fear of missing out. Right? Like, well, what if it's really this great person, but I just have a ton of issues and I'm seeing their behavior through my issues. And that can be a real kind of sticking point for a lot of people. But if you are grounded enough in your feelings, you realize that your perception of reality, I mean, it's all any of us have. And so and I would ask yourself too, like, do you feel this way about everybody, or is it just certain people? Odds are it's just certain people that you really are, your radar is going off around. And so realizing that it's a big world full of lots of people, and that you don't do perpetual confusion. You don't do crazy making. You don't do squirrely behavior, that kind of stuff. It really sets you free. And you don't need to wait for concrete proof for them to prove you right, that they really are indeed manipulative or abusive or toxic or what have you. Like, perpetual confusion, mental anguish, that's enough. Okay, hold on. Let's see here. Let me move my phone and see what my friend is texting me here. She's going to text me some questions. Yes, it's Manju's Life says, I'm ready to improve on myself. That's so important, because people get stuck in the I can't do this, etc., and the bad talk about themselves. And we need that positivity. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. It's so powerful to just realize that there is life after this, and that you can reassemble the pieces, and you can really cultivate resiliency And that, there's a concept out there called post-traumatic growth. And it's basically massive amounts of growth that only come from trauma. And most people that have made radical, amazing changes have done so on the other side of trauma. New Chris says, I used to think it was so new age sounding, but being a great parent to your inner child is important. Yeah, I felt the exact same way. It sounded real kind of psychobabbly or new age and, what is this inner child kind of thing? But it really is, your inner child is your authentic self. It's getting in tune with who you are and your wants and your needs and your feelings, and realizing that these things matter just as much as anybody else's, that you matter. And it's okay and healthy to make yourself a priority. Okay, so I think I just answered this question, but Tertain asks, how do you know if someone is unhealthy, or the fact they are simply a matter, it's simply a matter of the opposite sex is triggering you after lots of prior bad relationships? I think it's going slow and paying attention to how you feel and paying attention to how they're treating you. And I think for most of us, the more aware we are of what manipulative behavior, what more like covert manipulative behavior is, the more your eyes are aware of it. So at first, when you're experiencing that kind of stuff, like squirrely behavior, it can, if it's really covert, or if we're just thinking that it's something different than what we're experiencing, it can be really difficult to see what it is in the moment. But all of that kind of stuff tends to register as, that's strange, or that's odd, or that's confusing, or is it them or is it me? Like, do I have issues or is it them? All of that waffling back and forth, those are all kind of signs that what you're experiencing is manipulative or problematic. So going slow, it's okay to take a few steps back. If you're experiencing that kind of stuff from like from anybody, coworker, friend, neighbor, person that you're dating, whatnot, I will say, I think what tends to happen is when people first start waking up to this kind of behavior, they feel hypervigilant. They're like, man, I'm really seeing a lot of this in like a lot of different people. And then they wonder, like, am I being hypervigilant or is this really problematic? And what I think is really going on more so than a person just being hypervigilant is I think that they're really seeing manipulative behavior or problematic behavior clearly for perhaps the first time ever. And if we've spent our whole life, if we've spent decades glossing over this stuff and making excuses and allowances for it, oh, they had a bad day. Oh, they didn't really mean it like that. Oh, I bet that's just their nationality. They didn't know better. Oh, I bet, that just struck me wrong because of my relationship with my ex. Oh, they said that they were snarky because it's a Monday, right? There's all these different ways that they're old. Like they're old and cranky, or, oh, they're young and just rude and don't know better. Like there's all kinds of ways that we justify bad behavior. But when you start seeing it for what it is, you see it. And, it's just going slow when we do see it. And then kind of making a decision, okay, what does this mean? Does this mean I need to go no contact with this person? Or does this mean I need to slowly distance myself or whatnot? But I think so many of us, what we tend to do is with a new person in our life, we move full steam ahead. We're like, oh, they seem so great. And maybe they're really charismatic and charming and likable. And we just want to go full speed. But the reality is it takes time to really get to know a person. And so it's not even necessarily like that they have changed. It's just you're seeing them clearly for what they really are. So slowing things down, I think, is the number one thing, is just kind of it's valuing your emotions and realizing that anybody, especially the really charming manipulators out there, can do a really great job of seeming like a really great person, but only for so long, because it's not authentic. It's a mask that they're wearing, and their true self will eventually surface, but it's whether or not we can kind of see it, be honest with ourselves about what we're experiencing, and be knowledgeable enough about with manipulation to really pinpoint what we're experiencing. Okay. Straight up Christina says, how do I know what taking it slow looks like? I am so used to love bombing. The new guy I am dating, who I really like, is not doing that. So I keep having doubts that he even likes me because he's not. Okay. So yeah, taking it slow, there should be some level of like chemistry and flirting and interest there. But assuming that that's there, the love bombing, I think normal people that have a life, they have hobbies, they have friends, they have a job, they have things that they're doing that are healthy, I should say, because some manipulators have all those things too, and they're still make time to love bomb. But realizing that, that to text, making another person their whole world, or us wanting them to make us their whole world with multiple, dozens of texts every day, this kind of thing. That's all part of like this infatuation stage. And some people fall into that more so than others. It's more of lust. It's kind of this emotional immaturity, and that stuff fades out with time. So if you can see it for what it is, it's never really based on sincerity. It's more based on like this fantasy of what we think this other person is, that they may or may not be. So going slow, I would say, maybe seeing when you're first dating a person, you're seeing maybe, I don't know, not more than a few times a week. You're not spending every day together. You're not sleeping together right away. You're not sexting, you're really focusing on kind of doing your due diligence and interviewing them, seeing, is this a person that's worth me investing my time and energy and emotions into? Like, are we a good fit? And I'll tell you, even if they're not a manipulator or an abuser, let's say they're a really great person, this is almost just as bad. If we're, get caught up in like that infatuation phase and we think that they're a certain way, but they're not. And we're rushing into all of that. We're rushing full speed into the love bombing and the sex and the just making them our whole world. And then we realize, oh my goodness, this person is not what I thought they were, but they're a really great person. That's a terrible feeling, because it's like, oh my goodness, now I've just unintentionally led this person on and now I have to call it off. And that's super awkward. So it's just respectful of everybody's time. If you can realize that it's not just about us trying to avoid being abused, it's us valuing our time, and it's us valuing the other person's time. So we can make sure that if we're going to spend time getting to know each other, that we're actually a good fit. So I hope that helps. Jennifer says, one of my biggest problems has been assertiveness and confidence. My boyfriend suggested taking up self-defense, in particular, the Krav Maga. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, for women. Do you think this is a good idea? I think it's worth a shot. I know a lot of women that have taken up assertiveness or self-defense really enjoy it. The Krav Maga, that's, if I remember correctly, that's pretty hardcore. That's kind of very physical, very hands-on, like basically how to kill a person kind of stuff. So if that resonates with you, if that's something that you're interested in, it might be worth taking a few classes. I don't know if I'd sign up for, a 6-month program, but I would maybe take a few classes and just see. I think you'll have the clarity that you seek probably by the end of the first lesson. And maybe you could even go there and just watch a little bit and see if it's for you. But, there's karate, there's kung fu, there's most karate places offer like physical, like assertiveness and self-defense classes for women. I think that with those kinds of things, you might just have to try a few different things and just see. Okay, let's see. Jen asks, how do I learn to trust anybody again? I seem to doubt everybody and everything they say to me. That's such a great question. Trust is something, this was a big aha for me, okay? Is I think, and a lot of people, when they come out on the other side of these types of relationships, they're like, man, what's wrong with me? I can't trust the way I used to. I'm broken. It's this PTSD and this sucks. And what's so dangerous about this thinking and what keeps people stuck is they think, when I get healed, I'll be able to be like I was. I'll be able to trust like I used to be able to trust. And the reality is that's not the case. And it shouldn't be the case. Okay. That life is always about moving forward. It's never about going back to how we used to be. But that doesn't mean that moving forward means that we have to move forward in like a broken kind of way. It means that we can move forward and create a healthier understanding of things. So, for example, the old me, when it came to trust, I was very quick to take people at face value. I trusted everybody. I had the mindset of I trust people until I'm proven wrong. And I just thought that that was normal, I guess, in part. And I had gotten burned a few times with that, but nothing really major up until I, dated two different sociopathic men in a relatively short period of time. That was when I realized, okay, there's something, this is not a coincidence. Like now this is a pattern. So what's going on here? Like, what am I missing? And understanding trust was a big one because I took both of them at face value. Knowing what I know now, I would have slowed things way down. And frankly, I would have left a heck of a lot sooner because they were full of squirrely behavior. But I had that mindset of I need concrete proof in order for it to be a problem. And if I don't have concrete proof, if I just feel really uneasy and I'm losing sleep and I'm anxious and unhinged and insecure, feeling insecure, then I just need to deal with that. So there was a lot of different pieces to my thinking that needed to change. And realizing that trust is something that's earned. It's not just freely given, and it's earned over a consistent period of time, a prolonged period of time with consistent, appropriate behavior. So just because a person's, the guy, Gavin de Becker in the book, The Gift of Fear, he talks about this, that people confuse niceness with goodness. And that if somebody's nice to us, if they're likable, if they're charming, that we're quick to trust them. Especially if they seem to have certain things in common with us, if they're from our same hometown, or if they have the same name as somebody that we really like, or like a sister or a friend or what have you, or they're the same religion. These kinds of things get people to lower, and it happens to everybody, because we like people who are like us. That's just how people tend to relate. So knowing these things and realizing, okay, trust needs to be earned with appropriate, consistent behavior over a prolonged period of time is an absolute game changer. So if you're encountering people that you don't know, if you're meeting people on the internet, or if you're meeting male or female, and you don't know them, like you've met them twice and all of a sudden they want to come over to your house, or I don't know, like they ask you to borrow money or stuff like that. And you're like, man, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just trust them? It's like, well, because trust isn't there. That's why. So give it time. I would say don't even entertain the idea of truly trusting a person until you've known them. Trust doesn't even start to begin to get built until about 90 days out. And during that 90 days, spending and engaging with that person multiple times throughout the week. So it's okay and it's normal. And so all of that, all those reservations and doubts that you have, that's your healthy self coming through saying, hey, slow down. It's okay. Like, yeah, you don't trust this person because you don't know them. And the crazy making part of that is it's so often It's so common for other people around us, maybe even very well-intended people, friends, family, therapists, what have you, that are going to say, oh, you're hypervigilant. You've just got to trust sometime. You're very guarded, this, that, and the other. I really wouldn't listen to that. It's important that you learn to be able to turn inward and trust yourself. Because if you're feeling really uneasy about a person, there's generally a reason why. And it's more than just PTSD. So just going slow. And also, another big part with trust is, here's something else I learned, okay, is with trusting other people, the old me was very quick, especially when I first got out of these types of relationships. If I really fell for somebody, if I was really into somebody, it was this feeling of, I need to be able to trust you completely to not hurt me. And then it was the realization of, actually, you know what? I'm not, it felt like one of those trust falls, right? Like where you cross your arms and you fall backwards and you're hoping that somebody's going to catch you. That's a problem. And so the realization of, you know what, this other person's going to be human and they're going to act however they're going to act, and I'm going to respond accordingly. I don't need them to keep me safe or to not break my trust. Like, hopefully they're going to behave appropriately and honestly and openly. But you know what? If they don't, I'm going to be okay. I know how to, I trust myself enough to keep me safe. And so taking all of that pressure of just kind of, doing this free fall and being like, I hope they catch me. I hope they don't let me down. I hope I can trust them completely. And I hope that they don't hurt me. It takes all the pressure off of that. And just realizing, I'm going to go slow. I'm going to cultivate trust in a healthy way that's appropriate, based on appropriate behavior, not just based on how I feel about them. And when I say how I feel about them, like that I really like them, right? I'm going to live in reality, and I'm going to be honest with myself about what I'm experiencing, and then I'm going to respond accordingly. Okay. Yes. Okay. So with all of that said, you've seen me give a few examples now about the old me versus the new me. I would encourage you guys, if now in the chat, and then also after this ends, if you are journalers, to journal about some of the ways that you have changed. What are some of the ways old you versus new you thinks about certain concepts? So if you guys wouldn't mind taking some time, if you're comfortable, sharing that in the chat, because I think it really helps for other people to see different aha moments like that, to be able to identify, you know what? Yeah, old me used to think that exact same way too. I didn't realize that was a problem until this very moment. Or, yeah, you know what? I have been postponing healing until I could fully trust people immediately, like the old me. And now the new me realizes, oh my goodness, okay, I'm not broken. I'm just wiser. And it's going to take time to trust somebody, and that's okay. So old you versus new you. Let's see here. This is from James. Great question. Who says, Dana, what is the difference in between love bombing and sincere compliments? I'm dating and noticing some things being said that could be either. Love bombing, I think it's generally the intention. And sometimes the intention can be hard to kind of suss out. Love bombing is a person, they're basically after your money or they're after sex. And they come on fast and furious. I've never felt this connection before. They want to talk to you throughout the whole day. It comes across as very immature, and they move really quick. They really want to make you you feel like you've met your new best friend. You feel like you've met a soulmate, and we can tell, okay, one of the ways that you can tell if you're falling into this or if you're doing this is, if you think that you've met a perfect person. So these kind of feelings, this is all part of the idealized stage. And every relationship tends to go through this. So that idealized stage in and of itself isn't problematic. It doesn't always mean that the person's abusive, but it's problematic in the sense that it's always immature because it's never sincere. Healthy, mature people understand, yeah, love is blind. You're going to see things through rose-colored glasses. They're going to seem like the perfect person. It's going to seem like this amazing relationship, like you've won the relationship lottery. Most relationships start out like that. But if you can be aware of it and be like, you know what, this is just the oxytocin and the dopamine talking right now, because that's really what's going on. And I'm not seeing, if you think that they're the perfect person, you're not seeing them clearly because nobody's perfect, right? We're all human. Everybody's got quirks about them. That's just part of it. But that love bombing, I think probably the best example of love bombing is like online dating scammers. They really want to soak up a ton of your time. It's a bunch of false flattery. It's selling you on a fantasy. Oh, my mother told me I should take care of the ones I love. I'm so looking forward to having a family. I would love, to have this. It's premature. Talking about marriage and babies and moving in together, and they want to come see you, and they want to get a hotel with you, and blah, 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 blah. Like that's way too much too soon. Like those kinds of conversations, it needs to wait a while, months before that kind of stuff, at least, right? Like at least months before that kind of stuff kicks in. And so you might find that they're giving, but this goes back to it's a normal part of the idealized stage. They're giving you a ton of compliments. You're giving them a ton of compliments. You're like, man, and it can be sincere, right? So like love bombing is insincere, but it can be hard for us to tell another person's intentions. So I would encourage you to focus. We don't need to figure out their intentions. Focus on what is mature behavior, what is moving at a healthy, comfortable pace, and I guess just what is reasonable. Moving full speed ahead with the total stranger is just a recipe for disaster, really. So if a relationship is real, it's still going to be there in a month from now or 3 months from now. But if you're finding yourself, if you feel like you're complimenting them on things that are sincere, like, man, that, there's so much right about this person and you just want them to know that, that's okay. If you're feeling like, you know what, maybe I am unintentionally laying it on a little too thick, like maybe they're thinking, maybe it's making them uncomfortable, because some people aren't comfortable with compliments either, that it's okay to kind of dial that back a little bit or to just space them out a little bit more. If they're coming on strong and they're giving you a ton of compliments, and it's most likely a sign, if assuming that they're not an online dating scammer and that they're sincere, or they're not, emotional manipulator, it's most likely that they're just in that infatuation stage and they're seeing everything that's right about you. So I don't know. It just goes back to just going slow. Going slow provides so much clarity. Grace says, aren't we supposed to think we won the relationship lottery though? I think this is where I get confused. Yes. Ideally in a good, solid relationship, if you're with somebody and you're to the point where you're like so serious about them, you're going to get married, you want to be at that place where you're running down the aisle. You're like, absolutely, yes. I feel like this is the person I want to spend my life with. But the foundational stuff has to be there, like that trust, that respect, that sense of mutuality, open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication, all of that stuff. But it takes time. So that infatuation stage, which is about 90 days, that feels like you've won the relationship lottery. And it's during that kind of maybe the 30-day mark where you start really starting to see that person clearly, more clearly for who they really are. And, but if you can get past that idealized stage and more into kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but like the more grounded stage where you've seen these things about this person, the reality of them, they snore, they let their laundry pile up to you do your laundry every 3 days, they do their laundry once every 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Like the reality, they don't eat vegetables. You can't fathom not eating vegetables. They listen to music that you don't like. It's when people start becoming themselves and they're comfortable around you to share that stuff. Because really, most people are on their best behavior in the beginning. That's normal to an extent, right? Emotional manipulators do a fantastic job of mirroring, and they can create this soulmate connection, but it's not who they are. It's only who they are. They're mirroring us to hook us, to hook their target. And then we start becoming shocked by, oh my goodness, this isn't who they really are, because it was all a mask. But yeah, down the road, yeah, you definitely want to feel like you've won the relationship lottery, but feeling like you've won the relationship lottery when you don't actually have a relationship with that person, when you're still at like that acquaintance level of, okay, we've gone on 3 dates, or I've known this person for 30 days. It's still way too early to truly sincerely feel that way, because you don't have enough experience to base that feeling on. But that's a great question. Hazy says, I'm actually really proud of who I am today. I'm glad. Good for you. Sydney says, the old me does not give people the benefit of the doubt. Yes. And I think it's okay. It's okay to have deal breakers when it comes to certain behavior, and everybody's deal breakers are going to be different. Like I mentioned before, mine tend to be abuse of any kind, active addictions, adultery, or a really problematic attitude. Either they're incredibly negative or they're just not respectful to me or to other people. So that kind of stuff is a deal breaker. Mental anguish and perpetual confusion are often, or if somebody treats me with like aggression or hostility, like, no, I'm done. I am done. Let's see. Hazy says, I'm glad I found this channel. It's helped me quite a bit with dealing with past issues as well as present. My question is what to do when somebody denies their abuse. I think you have to realize when you're dealing with an abusive person, you tend to really be dealing with a very pathological personality. So you're not dealing with somebody who will ever share the same reality as you. They spin things around. They make themselves the victim of the situation. There is no sense of being solutions oriented or team oriented. It's all about them. They're very emotionally immature. They just don't they feel completely justified by abusing others. The mind of an abuser is basically, look at what you made me do. You forgot to buy bread at the store, and now that's why I yelled at you or cussed you out or hit you. If you hadn't forgotten to buy bread, I wouldn't have had to do that. So really, you made me do this. Like it's a very childish mentality that they have. And so if you can see how they're justifying it to themselves, I think in part that can kind of help set you free, because it's normal people, well-balanced people understand it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to get angry to a point, right? Like it's not okay to lash out at somebody else or to hurt them verbally or emotionally or physically. Like there's lines, or your behavior has to be contained in an appropriate adult context. Like you can't have basically the equivalent of a temper tantrum. You can't rage on somebody. You can't become physically aggressive. You can't kick and bite and spit and do all these things that kids do. Like that's not how adults behave. And yes, you're frustrated and angry, but it's not justification for it. If you can understand that they will never understand, it can help to set you free and to realize, you know what, they're never going to understand. So I really need to set myself free and quit trying to drag this horse to water, because there's not going to ever be any sincere accountability. You might get an apology, but in their mind, they still don't get it, because they're like, but you forgot to buy the bread, right? Like, I'll apologize for you. Be like, yeah, okay, I'm sorry for hitting you, but geez, don't be so forgetful. Like, they still don't fully own their behavior. So that's why it keeps happening, because they might be sorry for what they did, maybe in that moment, but it's their mindset that's so pervasive and persistent. It's all about them all the time. And they're so impulsive and so driven by their emotions and their frustrations and their anger and all of that, there's no sincere, healthy way that they relate to other people. Okay. Zachary brings up a good point about mirroring. He says the mirroring is really disturbing, but also if you watch videos of happy couples, they mirror each other too. I don't think it's always pathological. That is a very valid point. And I agree. Mirroring it's a way that human beings bond. And this starts at a very young age. We learn as babies, really, that we need to kind of get in sync with our primary caregivers. If we're trying to fit in with a group, people, like what I was saying earlier, people, we tend to all like people that are like us. And so people that like the same music as us, and it sounds so narcissistic, right? But it's a weird kind of like primitive way that our brains have linked up that basically this person's safe. They're like me. I know I'm safe, so they must be safe too. We have the same religion. We drive the same car. We like the same music. We have the same kind of sense of style. We sit the same way. We use the same type of language. These kinds of things. So we're mirroring each other, and it creates this sense of connection and the sense of safety with other people. So yes, to a certain extent, that's normal, healthy bonding. When it becomes a problem is when you see somebody basically morph into everything that you're wanting. And this can be and maybe this is almost best seen after the fact, because it can be very difficult to see kind of, I think, as it's unfolding, but it's something that manipulators tend to do. Perhaps something that's maybe some bigger signs to notice would be if somebody's really, I guess, just realizing that our defenses were wired for our defenses to go down if somebody is like us or if somebody seems nice. So just going slow and realizing that niceness is not the same as goodness, and that it just takes time to know a person, and that a lot of manipulators will either use charm or they will use pity. So that's another thing too, is we don't fear what we pity. And, if they're telling you a whole sad story about, oh, their ex was so awful to them, and, all of these awful things happened to them, and this, that, and the other, and they had this abusive childhood, this stuff may or may not even be true. And frankly, it's just to be aware of, if you're feeling sorry for somebody, that your healthy boundaries and defenses might not be there. So, and that takes practice, feeling compassion for a person, but from like a safe distance of, yes, that's incredibly tragic, but I don't know you. Like, you can't come move in with me. I'm not going to go, talk to you at all hours of the night. I'm not going to go meet you at your house. Like, I'm not going to jeopardize kind of common sense or my safety because a person I don't know is in crisis, or they're telling me these sad stories. Like, that's just not healthy boundaries. And we don't even need to figure out like if their past is even true or not. It really, frankly, we might not ever know. And so what's more important is looking at their current behavior. If you're starting to see things that don't add up, because abusive people always think that they're the victim. And so here are some, I think, bigger warning signs. Because somebody says, yeah, my ex had me thrown in jail. I've got domestic violence charges against me. I lost custody of my children. These kinds of things. 9 out of 10 times, there's a lot more to the story than what they're telling you. So that kind of stuff, it's just worth really slowing things down. And even if that is true, kind of weighing, like, is this something that you really want to walk into? Because that's a whole potentially big unresolved thing that they've got in their life that you might not want to take on. Okay. Healthy Love asks how to recognize if a compliment is authentic. That's a great question. I don't know. I guess if it seems like it resonates with you. If you can kind of, if the person sounds sincere, then I guess I would take it as authentic. I don't know. I'd be curious. I would be curious to know, what do you guys think? How do you determine if a comment is authentic or insincere? Let's see. Okay, another question about mirroring. Yeah, but about between friends, is it healthy? Is it ever healthy? I think to the closer the people in your inner circle, there's a saying that, you are the product of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with. And I would agree completely with that. And it's crazy because it's like that on every level. It's very good chance that you're probably going to weigh about as much as they weigh. You're going to have similar hobbies, that you're going to make about the same amount of money, that you're, the foods that you eat, the music that you listen to, the movies that you watch. It's amazing how in sync we all just kind of naturally get with the people that we spend the most amount of time with. So I think the point being is kind of choose your inner circle well, and then realize, it's normal for people to just kind of like the same things as other people in their inner circle. Truth Seeker is talking about compliments and authenticity, and says it's how the compliment is said and the way the words are used. Yeah, I would agree. I guess at this point in my life, I don't get overly attached to compliments or to criticism. And it's kind of nice. Like, it just kind of sets you free, because you can it is what it is in the moment. And then you move on. And more often than not, it's more, I think, of a reflection of what's going on with that person than anything else. Like, people that give a lot of criticism, hateful, spiteful criticism, it tends to be they're feeling inadequate, or they're unhappy, or they've had a bad day, or there's something that there's something going on within them. And so even if there's a kernel of truth in it, it just goes back to, you say what you mean, but don't say it mean. And unhappy people tend to say things that just perpetuate that unhappiness. But people that give compliments to others are often they're feeling safe and secure with themselves. They're comfortable and confident enough to be able to try to build somebody else up instead of so insecure that they've got to tear other people down. Yeah, Zach says, compliments can often be projections. Yeah, to me, it's a really great insight as to what's going on with somebody else. And it's nice, right? Like, getting a sincere compliment it's always nice. But I think it speaks volumes about where that person is in their life and what's going on with them. I mean, I try to give people compliments, like little compliments. I started doing this like years ago, when I realized, man, there's so many things I will think about another person that I never say. Like little things, because I'm like, man, I don't want to come across as weird, right? Like, especially if it's a total stranger. But then it's almost kind of more fun to compliment a total stranger, because you don't have to ever deal with that awkward. Like, if it is awkward, then you don't it's just, there's no hidden agenda. Like there's no feeling awkward. Like you're never going to see them again. It's just that sincere appreciation of, that there was a lady at the grocery store the other day that had this beautiful purple outfit on. And I wanted so much to compliment her, but I didn't. It was one of the few times I didn't compliment a total stranger when I wanted to, but just to let her know, like, wow, your outfit is, it's really nice. Like, why not? It just, it's sincere, and why not spread some positivity like that? Yeah. Jenn makes the comment, praise has never been a way to get my attention. It's actions, not words. I agree completely. That's very insightful. I agree. Yeah. With the whole like love bombing and the mirroring and all of that kind of stuff. Like it's actions. It's prolonged actions over a period of time. That's what matters. There's that saying out there that love is a verb. It's an action verb. And it's not words. It's not telling a person I love you. It's not words. It's the little things. It's, making a person tomato soup when they're not feeling well, or it's, if you've got kids, like putting a little note inside their lunchbox and just letting them know, have a great first day of school. Like I'm thinking about you. Or, offering, if your partner is having a really stressful week and they need to get the oil changed, going and getting their oil changed for them, or, you know what I mean? Like it's taking out the trash if somebody has their back is hurt, or these little things just can mean a whole lot. Okay, let's see. That's a good question. Laura says, I was wondering if you had any insight into stopping loving the abuser and redirecting that love, not just closing it off. I've gone emotionally dead after the reality hit. Well, I'll tell you what was some of the aha moments I had at that point in my life, and maybe this will kind of resonate with you, but I think it's very common for people to just become numb and feel emotionally dead after these types of relationships. And so, there were 4 decisions that I made that I realized I needed to make. And the first one was that I was not going to let what happened to me end my life. So that meant that suicide was off the table. Like I needed to not even let my mind go there. I just needed to shut that door. Like that's just not even an option. So take it off the table. The second realization was I was not going to let this ruin my life, even though I did not know how to not make that happen, because my life did feel ruined. I felt broken. My life felt like it was in shambles. And I think both of those things were accurate. But just setting the course of my life might be in shambles right now, but it's not going to stay like this. So this is temporary. And even though I don't know how, I don't know how to heal. I don't even know what I need to heal from. I'm not even sure what happened. I didn't have any of this clarity at that time in my life. I just knew that I wasn't going to let this ruin my life. So setting the intention, it's not going to ruin your life. The third aha was that I was going to take what happened to me and I was going to use it for my highest and greatest good. And this is exactly what you're talking about. So you had all of this energy, all of this love for this person, and you're like, man, I don't want to just let that die on the vine. Like there's a lot of energy and beauty and positivity in that. I don't want it to die on the vine, but I also don't want to keep feeling this way towards this abusive person. What do I do with this? If you can channel that energy, either anger or love, or a little bit of both, into something positive. I call this like emotional alchemy. Like you're transforming what is toxic or what is uncomfortable or unpleasant into something that's radically positive. So if you can take that energy, anger is I think just as there's as much energy in anger as there is in love. But anger and misplaced love, right? Can feel like a fire hose that's just going all over the place. If you can direct it into something positive, it can radically transform your life. It can be like rocket fuel. And you can do this in a wide variety of ways. Find anything positive. If that means organizing your closet, cleaning out your car, taking up juicing, going for walks every day, I don't know, playing with your dog, writing some letters to some other people that you know maybe are lonely or struggling, just letting them know, hey, I'm thinking about you. Putting out as much positivity, it just gives that energy a positive outlet, and it's incredibly healing. So that was the fourth realization that I had, was I was going to take what happened to me, and I was going to not only use it for my highest and greatest good, but I was going to use it for the highest and greatest good of others. And I think really that's when the magic starts happening. And it doesn't have to be in big ways even. It's little things. It's complimenting a stranger. If you're feeling really, it's amazing, like the shifts that it can happen in your life when you might be having a bad day, to seriously go compliment a stranger, hold the door open for somebody, give somebody a nice, sincere smile. There was a project that I've been wanting to do, healthy love. Maybe this is something that we could add to the list, but I went on this walking trail about 6 months ago or so with a friend, and it was so fun. Somebody had taken a bunch of rocks and they had painted them with little affirmations, and they were just peppered all over this trail. It was so much. I felt like a little kid going on an Easter egg hunt. It was so much fun looking for these rocks. And I think they had a website on the back of them. I don't even remember, but I loved the concept. And I thought, how fun would that be to just paint a bunch? I mean, it's a very low cost, low time intensive thing to paint a bunch of rocks and just to go, just letting other people know, like, hey, you matter. Like these words of affirmation, you matter. If you're a spiritual person, you could write different, spiritual passages or scripture on rocks, and just letting people know, like, hey, you matter, you are loved. There's so much right about you. And then just hiding them around your neighborhood. I think that would just be so much fun. Okay, let's see here. Jen asks, I was so isolated and ignored for so long. I don't know how to not be these things. So basically, how do I stop the isolation? And let me just take a little time out here real quick and just say, all of these things that I'm mentioning, these little strategies, I think people tend to get caught up in that they want that one thing. Like, what is that one thing that I'm going to do that's going to radically transform my life? Thinking that way can keep you stuck. It's not one thing. It never is, right? Like if you want to lose weight, it's never just like that one thing. It's a lifestyle. Like it's a combination of things. Same thing with getting sober. Same thing with healing from abuse. Same thing with anything, that growing a business or a YouTube channel. Like it's never just one thing that we need to do. It's a multitude of oftentimes little things. But then when you make a bunch of these little tweaks, it takes you to a different place down the road. And so some of these strategies that I might be talking about might seem really trite or like, oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, but whatever. But how do I heal from this? Or how do I stop isolating? It's a bunch of these little things. Like you really have to just dig your heels in and get determined that you're not going to let this ruin your life, and that you're going to start making positive, you're going to make climbing out of this hole a top priority. And that's going to happen in little ways and big ways every day, every moment of every day. So I would just start looking, just if you are a spiritual person or a religious person, asking for guidance. Like, what are some of the things that I can do? You will be surprised the things that God or the universe or that your brain even will come up with when you give it a job to do. Of, okay, how how can I bring more positivity and healing into my life? Like, how can I start to move forward from this and really cultivate that growth oriented mindset is just such a game breaker, game changer, not game breaker. I guess it is a game breaker, breaking the old game, creating a new one. And I had mentioned about healthy love and these rocks. Just kind of real quick, we are working on a book together. She's an artist, and it's going to be a book on basically wholehearted living, like life after abuse. And there's going to be, we'll see, probably about close to 60 paintings in it. And then there's going to be sections on it. I think we're planning on alternating, but we're going to do the old me versus new me for each of the paintings and have, so she's going to share the old her versus the new her with her thinking with different paintings. I'm going to share my aha moments and how I've changed as well. The whole goal is to really bring awareness and hopefully aha moments to other people by just sharing. I think most of these aha moments people tend to have are pretty universal. So just FYI, if you were wondering what I was talking about with another project. Okay. So, back to the question about isolation. You've been isolated for so long and ignored for so long, you don't know how to not be these things. So it's going to require a lifestyle change. And it's going to involve getting out of your comfort zone, which is never easy. And, I'm a big fan of meetup.com. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before. And making it a point, making it a priority to go do new things. And maybe just start off like once a week to begin with of, okay, I'm going to go meet this meetup group. There's all kinds of meetup groups. I mean, all kinds, you name it. Outdoor adventure groups and Reiki and movie night and play with your dog at the dog park and book clubs and writers groups, and there's an atheist group in my area. There's, you name it. So, and the cool thing with Meetup is that you can go and you can leave at any time. And I guess that's the thing is like doing anything new is going to require that we start practicing getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because learning something new is going to be about getting out of your comfort zone. And so, yeah, I get it. It's a much easier. I isolated for a while, for like at least a solid year after this. And it can really be easy to stay in that pattern. It feels safe, even though it can feel lonely and uncomfortable in certain ways. There is a certain degree of comfort. And if a person's feeling depressed on top of that, they might not have a lot of energy. And so it's just easier to go to bed at 8:30 on a Friday than it is to actually go out. So, but getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and stepping outside of your comfort zone. And I think sometimes when we start doing new things like that, especially if you're doing something that is interesting to you, that kind of takes on a momentum of its own. So there's not this, you don't have to, there does come a point where you don't have to push yourself so much to go. It pulls you because you're having a good time. I mean, there's trivia groups, there's walking groups, there's foodie groups, you name it. Zella asks, can you explain the red flags of a narcissist versus normal people or other mental disorders? I'm assuming that you're talking about, I did a whole video series about just different red flags of narcissists and sociopaths and stuff. Here's the thing. Every emotional manipulator comes across in different ways. And so the tactics there's a lot of similarity too within the tactics. Like they all tend to love bomb, they tend to move quickly, they tend to They don't deal well with like criticism or confrontation, or if they don't get their own way. They're often come across as emotionally immature. They are controlling, stubborn, jealous, difficult, demanding, crazy making. They have a bunch of squirrely behavior, these kinds of things. The specifics of all of that, it can be somewhat helpful, but it's the tactics that they use, they can change up. And so it's, when I talk about, it's more about how you feel around the person. I know that can seem really like woo woo and kind of just a nebulous thing, but how you feel is a really good indicator of what's like, of your environment. Our emotions are there for a reason. It's more than just feeling good or feeling bad. Like our emotions are very much tied to how we're perceiving information around us. And so if somebody's acting in a way that's concerning to you, then that's a sign that it's time to take some steps back. So it really, regardless, and there's lots of different types of mental illness out there. A person could also be struggling with like addiction or alcoholism. Like there's all kinds of reasons a person's behavior might be a little off. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. If their behavior is problematic to us, and they're not motivated to change it, or they can't change it, right, for whatever reason, then what? Like, then we need to be able to kind of figure out, okay, then what's our next step? I agree. Zachary says, for him, the huge red flags of narcissists are manipulative charm, lack of empathy, and superficial or intellectual vanity. For some reasons, the narcissists I run into are often sex addicts. I think it's an attention thing. Absolutely. That's so spot on. that was my pattern too. Like all of those things. Although I think for me, the big ones were charm, which by definition is insincere, charm, moving fast, whirlwind, man, like that piece of the puzzle, stopping that, realizing that a whirlwind is just a tornado waiting to happen, has been a game changer for me. Because before I had that mindset of like, but what if they're this really great person and I don't want to miss out on them? My internal alarms are screaming at me, but I just must have issues with men or with commitment or with PTSD or whatever. So I'm just going to go full speed ahead because I don't want to lose them. And that's not a good plan, because if it's real, it'll still be there and it won't be with those feelings attached to it. And then, the sex addict thing is, I think, a big one for a lot of them. But if somebody shows you that they have a lack of empathy towards you or towards other people or animals, that's a really big flag. That's a problem. And that's something that kind of that should be there in a person by like the age of 5 or 6. If they haven't really learned to connect in a healthy way to other people, that they're concerned, if they find the suffering of others or your suffering funny, or if they don't take it seriously, they just these kinds of things, that's a problem. And I would just say, you want a partner, not a project. And so to think, well, okay, I just need to get through to this person. I'm just going to keep being assertive and keep bringing my issues up. And I'm just going to keep having that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication with them, right? That is only valid if you're dealing with a team-oriented person. If you're dealing with a person who lacks sympathy, they lack compassion, they care. It's all about whatever they want. They just steamroll over your boundaries. Then you're wasting your breath. There's nothing there. And the whole attention thing with sex addicts, I think a lot of them, it's a performance that they put on, which is why they tend to come across as like the world's most amazing lover. And a lot of people struggle with moving past that. They're like, will I ever feel this way about another person again? And, I think when we do actually care for somebody, when it's sincere, it is nothing. Even if a person is just, amazing in bed, or they're amazing in some sort of way, when we know it's not sincere, you realize it's just an act. Like, they don't love, and they might even say, oh, they might even call it making love, but it's not. It's to them, it's putting on a performance, and they don't love us. They love how much we love them, and how attentive we are, and how enamored we are. And, oh my goodness, you're so amazing. You make me feel so, this connection we have is undeniable. You're my soulmate, blah, blah, blah. Like, they freaking love that. So yeah, seeing that kind of stuff for what it is huge. Okay, hold on. Let me see some questions here. Concerned customer says, when do you think narcissism develops? At birth, childhood, teenager, adult? I am coming to a realization about a family member and trying to put the pieces together. That's a great question. And here is kind of what psychology says about it, and then I'll tell you what I think about it. Psychology understands personality disorders. If we're talking about narcissism, like as a personality disorder, is something that generally has its roots in childhood. Most children are kind of by nature narcissistic. There's kind of really two age groups that are narcissistic. Probably, like, I would say, 0 to 6, and then teenagers. And teenagers are probably even on the more sociopathic end a lot of the time. Like, they have a total disregard for rules, and they're self-absorbed, and they're all about pushing boundaries and this kind of stuff. That's, in many ways, to an extent, a very normal part of just being a teenager. Personality disordered stuff, depending on what the child has gone through. So if a child has gone through like a ton of trauma, and they develop like reactive attachment disorder, they have trouble bonding to other people, that kind of stuff sets the stage for personality disorders later on in life. Mental health does not readily recognize. They're very cautious, appropriately, I think, cautious or reserved about talking about personality disorders within children, because children are still very malleable. Their personality is still forming, and it's kind of like a crapshoot. Like, they could really go a wide variety of ways with things. So early intervention stuff with trauma, with bullying, with abuse, with neglect, this kind of stuff, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes kids are just kind of, I think, more of like the psychopathy, where you're talking, it's more of like brain issues, more of just almost like a functional psychosis, really. That stuff tends to surface pretty young, and it may or may not have anything to do with their environment. Environment can definitely make it worse, but it may or may not. They could have a wonderful childhood and still turn out to be a psychopath. So I guess the point being is, it depends on what the person goes through and at what age, and if there's been any type of treatment, and how effective that treatment's actually been, and if they go through other stuff down the road. So there's just a wide variety of kind of nature, nurture stuff that goes on, but most mental health professionals won't really diagnose or formally diagnose personality disorders in a person until they're over the age 18. Then there's generally been like a pattern of behavior that's like, okay, this person's old enough to be able to have certain more adaptive, like coping skills to life and handling their emotions and interacting with others. And they should have kind of, grown out of the boundary pushing teenage kind of stage. Like, there's no need for it now when you're an adult, right? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Oh, I was going to give my 2 cents on it. Yeah, I guess my 2 cents is basically that. Like, this stuff does tend to start. It can start early. It can. I don't know. I think it tends to start more often than not, probably before high school. And you think about all the stuff that kids can go through before then. That's traumatic. Here's my take on this, and I really think that what would help a lot of people with this would be more talk on trauma. I think one of the reasons that children do tend to develop these like maladaptive responses to trauma is that nobody, well, for starters, they tend to be helpless, right? Like, if you're a child, you don't have any power in your own life. Like, you're stuck at home, and if your home is dangerous and destructive, then that's really difficult. But and it's difficult to be validated. So talking about emotions, talking about healthy emotions. I think dialectical behavioral therapy should be taught, like, basically starting in elementary school. More mental health stuff, teaching about the benefits of a positive mental attitude, talking about how to cope with stress and anxiety, normalizing this stuff, realizing that you're not the only one that goes through depression and anxiety and being bullied, and that it's okay. It's okay to feel how you feel, like that you're not alone in your pain, and having these discussions really young. It's weird. We have kind of this kind of glorified ideal of childhood, and we feed kids all of these messages. It's just kind of these happy-go-lucky messages, and the good guy always wins in the end. I kind of feel like it doesn't really help set them up to succeed, because especially in this culture where everybody gets a participation award, and like they can be coddled in so many ways that they're not developing resiliency and resilient. And it's hard to see somebody go through all of the trials in life, but helping them to develop that level of resiliency so they can learn that self-esteem of like, okay, I can handle this kind of a thing, I think is really powerful. And that's something I really hope that mental health, I think that's going to happen, is there's going to be shifts in that in the next 10 years or so. Okay. Jennifer says, how do you deal with covert manipulators that are in your outer circle, like neighbors, acquaintances, coworkers, especially when they chit chat and then decide to make inappropriate comments? Depending on the comment and I guess the level of inappropriateness. If this is a pattern, and let's say they're making inappropriate comments about your appearance, right? Like it's becoming kind of creepy and it's making you uncomfortable. I might address it directly and just say something like, that comment really makes me feel uncomfortable, or I'm just not comfortable discussing my body or being hit on or being flirted with, like, just trying to shut that kind of stuff down right away. That can take practice, because that kind of stuff, when somebody just comes at you sideways with an inappropriate comment, it can catch a person off guard. And that might, my default response when somebody makes an inappropriate comment is I tend to freeze. And more often than not, I will default into smiling and laughing, or just smiling and nodding, because I'm just at a loss for words and I don't even know what to do. So, and that's a hard pattern to break, because then it kind of unintentionally reinforces that that's okay for them to be creepy or to be inappropriate. And so I guess what I'm saying is, if you're kind of finding the same thing, like if you're responding in a way that you wish was different, to try to break that pattern to start with. And so giving yourself some space of, I've got to say something, I've got to go now, I need to go to the bathroom. just getting out of their presence instead of defaulting into whatever default response you might normally have. And then this way it'll kind of buy you some time to formulate a better response to it. So if they're asking a favor of you that you're not comfortable with, like they want, I don't know, they want you to watch their children. They want you to come over. They want, oh, I think you had that neighbor, right? That picked a bunch of blueberries and then brought them over and then was insistent that you eat some, like right then. And again, this is hard because I get it. I mean, that kind of stuff would catch me off guard too. But if that were to happen again, you could say something like, oh, thank you. I'm going to wash these off first. Right. And, or just say, I'm not comfortable eating something that's just freshly picked, even if it has nothing to do with that. Even if it's like, actually, I don't take food from people that give me the creeps. Right. Like that's the reality. But if you're trying to kind of be polite about it, just, oh, I'll dig into these later, or I'll wash these off and then dig into these later, kind of a thing. And if they're like, no, you've got to try one right now, just be like, no, I'm okay. Thanks though. Or I don't like blueberries. There's kind of different ways that you can try to shut that down. She says, yes, it was that neighbor. He brought over squash the following week. Yeah, that kind of stuff can make it really difficult. Oh boy. And she says, and 9 times out of 10, he's intoxicated. If that's the case, I think I would just, if he rings the bell, or I would just not answer the door. And I would just make it a habit of not answering the door and then just staying really busy. Just staying really busy. That's difficult. That's difficult. And hopefully he'll kind of get the hint after time. Gigi says, sex addiction is a true addiction. I'm a member of S-Anon, Support for Betrayed Partners. I know many recovering sex addicts and Sexaholics Anonymous. I believe that it can be an addiction, but to me, I think it really falls under, and this is going to sound harsh, but it's a character shortcoming. And it's one thing to be addicted to sex. There's many sex addicts out there that don't cheat on their partner. So to me, the moral failing really of going out and sleeping with anybody and everybody, my guess would be the degree of the overlap between sociopaths and sex addicts is sky high. Even among recovering alcoholics, estimates are 80% of them would qualify for antisocial personality disorder, even if they were sober. My guess would be with Sex Anonymous, it's probably in the 90s. So especially when you're dealing with stuff, I know it sounds really judgmental, but like stuff that's when you're talking about kind of a character, your word, right? And like that's that connection to your significant other, all of the lies, the deceit, the ego gratification, all of that. I think it can be definitely an addiction, but I also don't think that it should be an excuse for something that's workable. To me, that level of lying and the putting another person in danger like that, health-wise, is just unexcusable. And my guess is that there's a lot of other issues in that relationship besides sex addiction. Yeah, Mike says sex is a special connection unless all you see in people is sex. Yeah, I guess that's what's concerning to me is if a person is completely lacking in connection to another human being and it's basically just using another person to masturbate to. right? Like there's just no connection there. It's just about getting your rocks off. And that's concerning to me, and it's problematic. I agree. Gigi says most addicts have a narcissistic defense mechanism when in active addiction. Not until there is a strong recovery can one know if it's true narcissism. No, I agree. Normally they say 3 years after a person's recovered to see if what you're dealing with is actually personality disorder or if it's the addiction or substance talking. Personally, for me, I wouldn't wait around. Because here's the thing with behavior. When a person's already learned that they can meet their needs in some sort of way, their brain is wired for that. It's like Pandora's box. It's so easy to go back to that. Once a person is like stressed or upset or having if that's how they're getting some sort of need met, it's a lot easier for a person to walk through that door again down the road. And just like I said, like the level of damage, the level of trust, and the fact that it's a lot easier to hide versus like a meth addiction or an alcohol addiction. I just personally would not be in a relationship with a person where there isn't any trust or sense of mutuality. If their addiction is impacting our sense of mutual trust and support, then there's no relationship there. And I wish everybody well. Like it's really not coming from a place of judgment. It's coming from a place of discernment of it's okay to not be willing to walk with a person as they kind of recover from an addiction. I mean, most people that struggle with addictions, it's a process. They go around that mountain multiple times, and that's a lot for anybody else to take on. And but if just the lack of trust would be enough. Like I don't need to wait around to see if they truly are a sociopath or not. But having sociopathic behavior is enough. Having an active addiction is enough. Yeah, Gigi says yes. What fires together wires together. Yeah. I had an acquaintance of mine. I didn't realize like how real that really was. I have an acquaintance of mine. We no longer talk for this very reason. He is supposedly married to a woman. He says that she, never has sex with him. And he began sleeping around on her every chance he got. And after the first time, he told me about it. And he had said, it was him and his best friend. And his best friend had made the comment about Pandora's box. He's like, oh, dude, like you've really done it now. Like you've crossed that line. And now it's just going to be, now there is no moral dilemma. Like once you've already done it once, that's the hardest part. The hardest part is like justifying to yourself, how are you actually going to step out on your marriage? Once you've resolved that cognitive dissonance once in your mind, it's so much easier to keep doing it. And sure enough, that's where he's at now. And finally I got to the point where I'm like, why am I friends with this person? Like he's a cool guy. There's a lot of things that are right about him, but I can't be a part of that. Like I can't, like if I've never met his wife, but if I were to have ever met his wife, like I don't want to have secrets. Like I don't want to have to hold that and worry about what I'm saying. And I don't want to have that heaviness of knowledge. And it just, so, ended our friendship. And Gigi says, yes, my estranged husband said it was easier and easier every time. I would imagine, and it probably gets funner and funner every time because there's more and more dopamine that's being released. Because I would imagine the first time or the first few times a person steps out on their marriage, it's more about, there's probably that anxiety. It's probably a lot of like cortisol and like anxiety going on, right? About, am I going to get caught? Is this the right thing? Maybe if the person ever had a conscience to begin with, but probably there was that waffling of, I don't know if I should do this. And, there's nervousness. But once a person gets that down and they know how to manipulate their spouse and all of that, I would imagine that there comes a point where that would be fun. And then it's just this game of like, how much can I get away with? And, it's the thrill of somebody new. It's the thrill of feeling wanted. It's the thrill of flirting. It's the thrill of sneaking around. It's all sick, but I could totally see how somebody could, it's the thrill of a new relationship all the time, Uh, Jennifer asks, what if you're in a serious relationship with somebody who has narcissistic tendencies? For instance, they have a problem with bragging, but you still trust them. Is that something that should be a deal breaker? Everyone has faults, right? Yeah, I think everybody does have faults, right? We all do. I guess bragging, it would be, I guess when I think about a person bragging, it strikes me as they're very insecure. So like, why are they feeling the need to brag and kind of prove to themselves that they're good enough? Like, what's that about? But it kind of quirky stuff or insecurities like that, as long as it's not impacting like, the mutuality, the ability to work as a team, the respect and dignity for each other. There's that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. They seem like a good person not just seem like it, they've proven through their actions that they're a good, solid person. They have empathy, they have compassion, they they're on a similar kind of life trajectory, like you're moving in the same direction. If you have those kind of key things in place, then then some of that stuff might just be insecurity or just kind of quirky stuff about a person's personality. But time will tell with that. Mike says, I do believe that underneath the narcissism, there's still that wounded child somewhere, especially when they get a narcissistic injury. I think the difference is it's not underneath the narcissism. That's their personality. It's sort of like if you plant a tree, right? And that tree goes through some sort of storm or something happens to it. And it starts growing in a certain way. There comes a point where that's just the tree, right? It's not that the tree is like, it is just that way. And so with a personality, with that kind of like disordered personality, that's their personality. There is no kind of like peeling back the layers to like, there's some sort of healthy self there. That's the problem. There was never a healthy self that was able to develop for whatever reason. Maybe they were incredibly spoiling can ruin a person too, just as much as trauma. And so they might have been incredibly spoiled and entitled growing up. They never learned how to develop healthy self-esteem. They always got self-esteem from stuff. Or they went through a lot of trauma, or maybe they were bullied in school. I think there really does tend to be some sort of event that and it doesn't have to be major. I mean, like I had a friend of mine whose husband was like textbook narcissist, and he was really grandiose and he was really insecure. I think everybody really saw it except for her and him. And one day, I don't remember if he was telling me the story, if she was telling me the story, but something about he was always overdressed all the time, like to a point where it was just like, dude, what are you doing? Like it's Saturday afternoon and this guy's got on like alligator shoes, and not that I hung out with him that much. We were in this group together anyways, but the times I did see him, he was always very overdressed. And he had said that his mother, I think they grew up poor. His mother had sent him to school one day, I think for like school photos or something. And he was ashamed of what he was wearing and he was teased about it. And so it was like that day he decided that never again would that happen. And that was like, 30 something years ago. And so he'd been overcompensating for that his whole life. And he did that in so many ways that he was a sex addict. He, always had to, they were the Joneses. Like they had the nicest house and the nicest cars and the nicest neighborhood and the nicest vacations and the best clothes and all best of the best of the best. But with him, it was all about trying to fill that bucket of feeling good enough. And it was just never enough. That bucket had holes in it. So I don't know. I think people were more fragile than we realized. Like, I don't think it takes a whole lot for a person to necessarily kind of develop like that unhealthy bend in their personality. James is talking about physical abuse. He says they actually go from verbal abuse to physical abuse. It's not if, it's when. And I would, oftentimes that's definitely the case. Abuse is progressive and it tends to get worse with time, not better. And that's because they settle in and they become even more entitled and justified and opinionated about what other people, especially in their inner circle, should be like. My child should be a doctor or an attorney, or they should dress a certain way, or they should behave a certain way, and they should have a certain type of sexuality, and they should have a certain type of religion. Like there is no appreciation of individuality. It's like you're my child or you're my spouse. You're an extension of me. I need you to be a certain way in order for me to feel okay, is basically what that boils down to, even though I don't think that they're aware of that. And so then when these other people in their inner circle start showing their individuality, right? Like hey, Dad, I'm gay. Or, hey, Mom, I'm gonna, you really want me to play football, but hey, you know what? I'm more into chess. Or you really want me to play chess? I'm more into football, right? Or it's just like growing up in that kind of environment, or having a spouse when you're married to somebody like that. It's this constant twisting yourself into a pretzel, trying to be what they want you to be. Because if you don't, then they start grinding those edges down, and you're constantly told that what you want to do is somehow stupid, bad, or wrong. And, that's a problem. So but anyways, the abuse, when it starts escalating, abuse is progressive, but it's not always predictably progressive. And this is where things can get really dangerous, because people will often think like, well, I'm not being, there are these different inventories out there on like risk assessment type inventories about how dangerous an abusive partner is. And my main beef with these inventories is the unintended consequence of them is that it can provide a false sense of security, of thinking like, oh, well, this person's never threatened me before. They've never been violent before. Therefore, it's not that bad. So I'm just going to continue to stay in this relationship, hoping that they change. And, we're just going to keep staying in therapy. Things can escalate fast. If you're dealing with a person who does not care how their actions impact you, and they are low on empathy, and they have no compassion, and they just don't give two hoots about how they treat other people, that kind of behavior, and they're driven by their whims, right? It's the whole, you forgot to buy bread at the store, therefore that's why I did this. Depending on what other stuff is going on in their life at that moment, they can escalate really quickly. Scott Peterson wasn't an abusive husband before this. Like he went from, lying and cheating and like siphoning funds and having this girlfriend on the side to boom, murder, because it was like his wife and his unborn son got in the way. So that's what's so scary, is you don't, just because somebody hasn't been abusive in one way doesn't mean that they can't quickly escalate to that. This is why I talk often about, when you start seeing cracks in a person's mask, and when they start showing you their true colors, and when you start seeing character deficiencies, things that involve like pathological lying and cheating and stealing and this kind of stuff, that you're dealing with a person who's really low on empathy and compassion and sincere connection to other people. These are some major red flags. And whether or not that stuff is able to get resolved after they get sober or whatnot, you're running a risk. And I'm just a big fan of keeping your distance and making sure that you're staying safe and sane. Hazel says, yes, my husband was emotionally abusive for years and then physically assaulted our son. Yep. And Zachary says, when somebody treats you like you don't matter to them, believe them the first time. Yeah, it's true. And I think normal, decent people, we have a hard time understanding this kind of stuff. We have a hard time understanding this kind of stuff. We almost need to find a reason for their behavior of like, it must be due to stress at work. It must be due to their childhood or due to, lack of sleep, or they didn't have a good lunch, or, you know what I mean? It's easy. I think that what's important is to realize it's easy to justify this kind of stuff. And it's important that we don't. It's important that we give these things, this kind of problematic behavior, when it's showing there's a potential character deficiency going on here, to give that the weight that it deserves. And another challenge with that is it can feel really judgmental. It's not. Like, it's about being discerning. It's about being self-protective. So it's not about you saying that they're wrong or they're bad or that they're immoral. It's not about that. It's not about you judging them. It's about you discerning what's okay and allowable and workable in your life. And if you kind of set that standard and that intention of, you know what, I'm going to keep people in my life that treat me with dignity and respect. There's that sense of mutuality. It's team oriented, trust, all of that kind of stuff. Then that sets the standard. And then there's not we're not justifying stuff that we really would be wise to not justify. Mike says, I would think that only antisocials resort to violence. I mean, really, anybody can resort to violence. So it's generally, I think it's a mistake to think that like narcissists can't become violent, because all antisocials, all sociopaths and psychopaths at the core are narcissists. It's shades of the same color. So it's that level of like entitlement and the blinding degree of selfishness. A person has to be really selfish in order to be like, I deserve to hurt you, right? Like that's really entitled, self-absorbed kind of behavior, to think that like, oh, it's okay for me to hurt others or to take the life of somebody else. Especially if they're not being provoked, right? Like if they're not, if their own life isn't threatened, like that's a whole different scenario. But like, to become physically or verbally abusive to somebody really takes quite some it should take some mental gymnastics to do. And, normal people tend to not do that. Like there's this containment of behavior of like, we know, right? Like it's okay to get frustrated and angry, but it's not okay to like rage out on somebody or to, rear end their car or to threaten them. Like there's limits to what we realize is okay. Yeah. And up here says, Dana, I've known a few people that I believe are alcoholics. 2 of them have had horrible childhoods and used it to cope. They don't appear to be ASPD. 2 are over 5 years out of alcohol. I agree. I mean, I have several recovering alcoholics in my life that although I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily say that they're not personality disordered still. Maybe not antisocial, but here's the thing with substances. When a person starts using substances, they basically check out. So all of that emotional maturity that we tend to gain through experience and through learning the lessons, they don't have that. They're living life on autopilot. They're checked out. They're drunk or they're high. Like they're not there, right? And so there's not this emotional growth. So it's very common for a person, if they started to be kind of frozen in time, like if they started drinking at 16 and then they get sober at 46, that they still have the emotional maturity of a 16-year-old. Or they still dress like they're 16, do you see what I'm saying? Like it's weird how and that's not all the time, but that's a lot of the time. They're missing a lot of kind of these core skills. They can work I think AA, there's a lot of things that are really right about AA. And I think it can really help foster healthy emotional growth and accountability and self-awareness and these kinds of things, but it takes work. I think there's this idea out there with a lot of people that think, oh, if this person just got sober, that, if you just peeled off the alcoholism, that they'd just be this healthy, well-adjusted person. And that's not the case. Like you would need to, kind of get rid of the toxic, the alcoholism, the addiction, the monkey on their back. You got to get rid of that. But then you've also got to put in a bunch of positive stuff, coping skills and self-awareness and, all of that kind of stuff. And that takes time. Okay, let's see here. Mike is saying, he says, nobody says I have BPD. When you say BPD, are you talking, because BPD is borderline personality disorder, but it's also known as bipolar disorder. That I have the only illness I can match my symptoms to. Hold on, let me scroll up here. I think he was saying something about high highs and low lows. And when he feels high, it's very grandiose. He says, I have borderline symptoms, but I'm not borderline according to my doctors. Okay, borderline. Have you spoken to your doctors about that? Because, personality disorder is just like mental illness. It's on a spectrum. And some people, what you're describing, the high highs and really low lows, that sounds more like bipolar disorder. So it might be worth bringing up to them and seeing and saying, these are my concerns. Like, this is what I'm experiencing. And these are some of the behavior, like when I'm feeling really high, it's very common for a person who's manic. And again, there's different degrees of mania. Different people experience mental illness in different ways. Some people that are really manic, they might become very hypersexual. They might start spending a lot of money. They might do things they might talk a lot, talk really fast. Like there's this pressured speech. They might not sleep. So they're staying awake. They might only be getting a few hours of sleep a night. They might not be sleeping for days. They might think that they can do anything and really have this, kind of grandiose, almost even sometimes delusional sense of self. Of I can do it. They might start businesses. They might invest money. They might do all kinds of things that seem concerning to other people. The lows can be really low, or they're incredibly suicidal. They just feel worthless. When those lows hit, they can really crash. But some people experience more of a moderate mood swings, where they're just like, I feel this, something just feels off. So, if that's what you're experiencing and it's concerning to you, I think it's insightful and it's very telling if you're experiencing some stuff that's going on with your mood or with your thinking that you're like, you know what, I'm not sure that this is normal. And this is concerning to me, then yes, it's time to go see a psychiatrist, not just a regular medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and let them know, and then go from there. Okay, let's see. Abuse Free says, hi, Dana, please talk about how to get in touch with needs and wants when you were never in touch and just starting to get in touch. Please give some examples of needs and wants. So, I mean, obviously this can be a very individual thing. So, I think it starts with kind of tuning in to what nourishes you and what drains you. I think that would be the first step. So, for example, if you are like, you know what, man, I just really get drained when I'm around people all day. That's just not, that just doesn't, some people that really energizes them. But for a lot of people, it can really drain them. So if that's draining to you, realizing, you know what, I need some time to just decompress. So if you're working in customer service where you're dealing with people all day long and you get home, to realize if that's you, if you're like, you know what, I really just need like an hour to just decompress and recharge and to just be alone. Okay, then that's something that you need. And so then when you know that about yourself, you can kind of guard that time and schedule some downtime. Or wants might be that you really want, you decide, you know what really nourishes me is being at the beach versus maybe, I don't know, some people are mountain people, some people are water, lake people, or ocean people. These are just examples that are coming off the top of my head here, so bear with me. But like, so let's say, for example, you have a partner and maybe every vacation you've gone on, they love to go skiing and they love to go up in the mountains. Even during the summertime, they love to go up in the mountains. And then you get home and you don't really feel like you've ever had a vacation. You're like, I don't know, that just didn't really do anything for me. I don't really feel recharged. Or maybe they really like to go visit big cities, and that just stresses you out. And so then you get back from this vacation to New York, and you know, your spouse is like, oh man, that was so fun. And we did all these things. And you're sitting here thinking like, I feel like I need a vacation from my vacation. Like that wasn't enjoyable at all. I feel really exhausted and stressed out, and I just need some downtime to decompress. So kind of knowing about like what types of environments nourish you and then what types of environments drain you is a good start for kind of getting in tune with wants and needs. Sleep requirements, nutrition requirements. Some people do better eating more carbs. Some people do better eating less carbs, and I should say refined carbs, because carbs is pretty much in everything. But like, you know what I mean? Like some people do fine on starches and carbs. Some people don't. Some people are more extroverted, some are more introverted. Some people like big cities, some people like small towns, some people like mountains, some people like lakes, some people like their idea of a fun Friday night is maybe staying in and having a bottle of wine and playing a board game. And other people, it might be going out and going club hopping. So getting clear about kind of what do you like? You know, what do you like? What do you dislike? It's okay to dislike certain things or to not like them as much as other things. And the more that you know kind of what you like, the easier it's going to be to tune into like your wants and your needs. I think a lot of people go through life thinking, living in this like should mentality. I should want this. I had a friend of mine, this was years ago, her and her husband, they had gone through so much. She had gotten pregnant when she was a teenager, and they got married young. And anyways, he joined the army. They had no money for a very long time. And then they ended up becoming real estate investors and became multimillionaires. And so they ended up building their dream home, or what they felt should be their dream home. Okay. It was this huge house and they all moved into it. And I think that didn't last very long. Like, I think they ended up moving out. I mean, months. Like, they moved out within months because they realized they're like, this is not us. Like, they had built this whole, like, we should want this, right? And then there was just this whole awareness of like, what else are we doing that we feel we should do? Like, we should want to drive a brand new car, but that just wasn't them. And so I guess, like, are you doing things because you want to do them, or are you doing things because you feel like you should want that? Like, you should want to go to New York, but really you'd rather go, like, if you're me, like me, I don't like vacationing to big cities at all. I would much rather go spend time in a small town. You know, it's just getting kind of clear on what juices you. Cody says, yeah. Oh yeah. The shoulds need to be removed from our vocabulary. Yes. That is a great point. Sweetbriar, thank you, says needs begin at food, shelter, proper clothing, basic health care. Some codependents get so used to putting other people's needs and wants first that they don't provide for their own basic needs first. That is an excellent point. Excellent point. Backing it way up, because that's so true. Healthcare, sleep, truly taking care of yourself, knowing what you need, sleep requirements, food requirements, clothing, making yourself a priority, treating yourself like you would somebody that you loved. If you had a child, you would make sure that their clothes were clean, that they were, getting showered every day, that they were eating every day, 3 meals a day, that they were going to the dentist, that they were going to the doctor when they needed to, like these kinds of things. Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you pointed that out. Sweetbriar too, I wanted to say thank you for the donation the other day. It's been a while. It's been more than a day. I wanted to send you a letter. I don't know how to get a hold of you, and I don't know if I can get a hold of you through Patreon or not. So if you're interested in sending me your address, maybe through a message through YouTube, I would really enjoy being able to send you a thank you card. And Missouri Cowboy, I would be more, just if you're still here and if you're thinking about what I just said, I'd be more than happy to send you a thank you card too. And I would be my honor to do that as well, with as much as you've supported me in the channel. Zachary asks or says, sometimes I feel bad for my narcissistic exes because I believe they're broken on some fundamental level. Yeah, I think that's normal to, when you realize, like, boy, this person is just dangerous and destructive. They are a wrecking ball in their own lives. Like, they don't, even if it's all intentional, like, it's so sad that they're having to play all of these games to feel good enough, or to feel like I don't know. It is sad, but I think we can have compassion for other people, but from a safe place. It's when that compassion our compassion for other people, like, supersedes our compassion for ourselves, and we start putting ourselves in harm's way because we think that they're broken, and so we somehow need our I don't know, being extra nice to them, or our love can fix them, can make things okay. I remember seeing not too long ago on YouTube some sort of video. These parents had, their child was murdered, and they decided to go out to lunch with the murderer. I don't know what that's, obviously the person wasn't still in jail. Like, they got out after a certain period of time. And I just remember I was so upset by that. I'm like, this is such terrible boundaries. And, and here these parents are, I don't know, it bothers me that society thinks that, of like, oh, this is somehow, a sign of compassion or a sign of appropriate forgiveness or somehow emotionally advanced, right? Like, oh, we're so emotionally healthy that we're going to go spend time with the person that murdered our child. That's concerning to me, and not to knock them. I think people do a wide variety of strange things when they're moving forward to heal. But like, I think a lot of society thinks that we somehow need to be friends or friendly to dangerous and destructive and deadly people. And I think that's ridiculous. And I think it's dangerous thinking. Mike says narcs need antipsychotics. And Bonnie had said, Dana, do you think like anti-anxiety or antidepressants help take the edge off of narcissistic rages? So a person can have more going on with them than just like a personality thing. They can have, there's a disorder out there called intermittent explosive disorder, where a person, and frankly, I think some of this stuff is just shades of narcissism, but like with intermittent explosive disorder, it's basically where a person becomes explosive intermittently. They don't do well with emotional regulation at all. Like they go from 0 to 10 really quickly, and they don't handle frustration or anger or not getting their way easily at all. I think personally, you're just, 2 steps to the left of narcissism when you're, if even that, when you're talking about that, but because it's not, that behavior is not coming across as like with the grandiosity and the, kind of the other features of narcissism, it's called something else. And not to mention a person can also have mental illness. Like they can be bipolar or have an anxiety disorder or PTSD. They can have like PTSD and a personality disorder. I mean, they could be diabetic, they could have cancer, they could be diabetic and have cancer and have borderline personality disorder and have bipolar disorder and be an alcoholic and, be a casual meth user. Like a person can have a lot of stuff going on with them. So it can be really difficult to tell what goes with what. But generally, when you're talking personality stuff, like intermittent explosive disorder, medication can, to some degree, help with that, but generally not, because you're not going to be on anti-anxiety or Xanax, high doses of Xanax every day, all day long. Like there would be heavy amounts of therapy in there with a person learning like emotional regulation. So medication, so that's one of the differences between personality disorders and mental illness. And people tend to confuse this because they're like, well, like sociopaths are mentally ill, right? Like they're nuts, they're dangerous, they're destructive, they're and I use the layman's term, how people describe it, they're nuts. People that are mentally ill, they're not nuts. They have chemical imbalance kind of stuff going on. Difference. But mental illness, the difference there is mental illness, it's more of like kind of brain chemistry disorders, whereas personality disorders, medication doesn't help with personality disorders. They are that way. Mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenic, schizoaffective, if a person's on medication, you'll notice a big difference in their behavior. And they're like that. Mental illness, they're like that. Personality disorders, they run hot and cold because they can control it to some degree. It's just it's their mindset. It's the way their wiring is, the way that they view the world. It's not their wiring with like necessarily like their brain. It's their mindset and their personality. That's the problem. So medication generally doesn't do much for personality disorders. The main treatment is therapy. And even that doesn't move the needle with, with narcissism or antisocial personality disorder. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, and Zach says, I think the thing that's so confusing about cluster Bs and personality disorders in general is the comorbidity. Yeah, there's lots of overlap, especially when you're dealing with cluster B kind of stuff. Tends to be like the defining features are dramatic, erratic, and emotional. And that kind of stuff can come, and it's on a spectrum, right? Like it can come across in a wide variety of ways. And sometimes you're like, man, I'm not really sure if I'm dealing with a really dramatic narcissist or if this person's like, or a sex addict, dramatic narcissist. And if they're, are they really histrionic and like not a narcissist or what? But this kind of goes back to, that kind of stuff, trying to figure it out. That's more, it can be interesting, right? To kind of view behavior through these different lenses of like, what am I seeing? But really what's most important is turning inward and figuring out kind of where are my standards, my boundaries, my deal breakers, at what point is a person's behavior just not okay with me? And I think it's probably a good rule of thumb to just assume that other people are not going to change. That to have another person in your life thinking, man, they'd be so great if they, if they just weren't a hoarder and if they just lost 100 pounds and if they could take up golf and if they dyed their hair blonde, man, they'd be, if they'd quit yelling at me, like they would just be so great. And isn't that interesting too, how it sounds ridiculous when we talk about it in terms of, oh, if they lost weight or quit being a hoarder or took up golf, like we're quick to discount that. But then we're like, but I don't know, if they yell at me or if they cuss at me or if they're dangerous, then maybe somehow that's more workable. Isn't that interesting? So it's all on the same, people are people, and kind of thinking that another person can change when they're not motivated to change is hope delayed like that is really, it's denial is what it is. Bonnie asks, if you are religious, some priests say, pray the problems away. Well, I think there's certain level of it's like the serenity prayer. And I haven't heard it in years. Like dear God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom to change the things I can. No, the strength to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that prayer is the most profound, well-articulated prayer out there. And it's just about knowing what do we have control over? What do we not have control over? If we have control over it, work to change it. If you don't, you just got to let go and let God. That's all any of us can do. But I don't, letting go and letting God it helps to kind of keep us centered about like what we do have control over. But I wouldn't consider praying for another person like a real like proactive strategy. God also gave us discernment, and there's many passages in the Bible that talk about discernment and being able to tell the difference between people and like choosing wisely, basically. So to me, a proactive approach is discernment. And that just goes back to, and your inner wisdom, your intuition, all that stuff knows. Kitties are cute says, how do you talk to someone you care about when you feel that the new relationship they're in is a whirlwind romance? and the honeymoon phase isn't over yet. Well, it's difficult because they most likely aren't going to hear you if they're in the honeymoon phase of a whirlwind romance. They're going to be in that idealized stage of, this person's so amazing, I've won the relationship lottery, and if anybody critiques them, then it's, oh, well, you're just bitter, you're upset because you're single, or you don't want to see me happy. Like, they're going to get defensive because they don't see that that's a problem. And so really, all you can do is just kind of be there, and because they're probably not going to listen to you. I mean, if you're going to say anything, it would just be, hey, I love you, and I'm excited that you're so excited, and I really hope this relationship works out. I'm nervous for you, and I just hope that maybe you could, I hope that you go slow enough. I just don't want to see you hurt, and letting your intentions be known. But then at the same time, realizing like you don't have control over that, and they're going to do whatever it is that they're going to do. And, and then it'll be kind of up to you to just, depending on how things go, if it all falls apart, then, are you going to be there as a friend to pick up the pieces? And, then what? Mike asks, why do they say that narcissists are rare? They are not rare. Well, I think it's because when people are talking about narcissistic personality disorder, they're talking about it in terms of like specific criteria that a person has to meet. And so, a person taking a bunch of selfies, and here's the thing is, it's under narcissistic personality disorder. It's seen through the lens of, okay, there's certain key criteria that a person needs to have in order to qualify for that. And a personality disorder is a person basically has really pervasive, so ongoing, problematic behavior that's, not normal for like their age, or I should say, basically we're talking like 18 and over. So it's not a stage in like normal development. It's not due to, untreated mental illness. It's not due to like drug or alcohol use. It's not due to potentially even culture is often figured into it. So it's, there's this grandiosity, there's this entitlement, there's this lack of empathy. These kinds of things can be really difficult for an outsider to assess, because if you have a narcissist coming in, unless they're so over the top, like I was telling you, my friend's ex-husband who was dressed to the nines. I mean, my goodness, he was so grandiose, and he was so self-absorbed, and it was so obvious, and he had this longstanding pattern of like being a pathological liar and cheating, and it was just selfishness, right? But a lot of narcissists don't come across like that. And you've got some that are more on like that sociopathic end, like the Bill Cosbys or the Scott Petersons, or what was her name? Casey Anthony's of the world, that really can fly under the radar. And so that behavior, I think, it tends to get glossed over. And even with mental health clinicians, there's this idea of like what a sociopath looks like or how a sociopath acts, and that level of charm. And especially if they're pulled together, I think a lot of mental health clinicians that aren't really familiar with sociopaths think of them as being very disorganized, kind of living on the fringes of society, almost kind of like Unabomber, Charles Manson type personalities. And they may or may not be like that. So and then trying to figure all that out. And if, when you're only seeing a person for like 50 minutes, like once once maybe, or every few weeks is, the whole system is just difficult. It's difficult. That's why it's so low, underreported. And also narcissists and sociopaths don't often come into therapy unless it's court appointed. So lots of different reasons. But yeah, I would agree. I think that's definitely a problem. And so like Missouri Cowboy asks, how can a culture be narcissistic if the majority of its population is not narcissistic? And is narcissistic behavior rewarded in a narcissistic culture to encourage even more narcissists? So for example, I think the goal of that is to see to avoid like moral, like cultural superiority. So if you, which I think is its own slippery slope, and I don't like that, because I think we need to be able to say like, yeah, just because that's their culture, that they stone women, or that they cut off, they burn, they brand women, or that they, kill homosexuals, just because that's their culture doesn't make it okay. And it bothers me that that's somehow given a free pass of like, well, but their behavior is within the realm of their culture. It's like, well, then you know what? Maybe their culture is really effed up. And maybe, I don't know. So the point is, if somebody's acting in a way that would be seen appropriate for their culture, then it's not necessarily considered personality disordered. It's just considered as this person is of a certain culture, that this is how they treat other people, or certain types of other people. Okay. I think Missouri Cowboy's talking about, could it be that we live in a narcissistic culture, and therefore our culture is in denial about the percentage of people in the culture that are narcissistic? We're at an interesting place in society, aren't we? With the internet and social media, and even, YouTube, stuff like this, where people can like, there's more attention on them. If you have a YouTube channel, or if you're really active on social media, and it's a weird place. And I like for me in this channel, I'm 41. So I didn't grow up with this kind of stuff, and it does feel weird to me to have social media and to have a YouTube channel and do all of this. The only real reason I do this is because this is where attention is. And this is the best way for me this is the most effective way for me to get my message out. If I wasn't talking about this, I would have never, not to say that there's anything wrong with people that have channels about like makeup, or they vlog about their life or anything. That would have just never, ever crossed my mind or been something that I was interested in. So it's cool, the internet connects people, but then at the same time, the internet can also make people kind of weird. Like, and I think the anonymity that the internet provides, like, it's a lot easier to bully people. And yeah, it's not seen as superficial or vain or shallow if a person, has a channel that's all about appearances and that kind of stuff. I don't know. We're just at an interesting place. It's interesting to me to watch teenagers and kind of how they use the internet, how they're so comfortable and they're so open about their whole life. And what concerns me about that is more of the kind of outward validation of how many likes that their posts or pictures get, or that they have followers. And it's just, that's concerning, because then what if that goes away? Like, what if you don't get 26 likes on a post? Then does how you feel about yourself, is that impacted? And is that negatively impacted? And I don't know. Astrid asks, can you explain what you mean when a narcissist is spiritually abusive, with the exception of gurus? So spiritual abuse, it's power, getting and maintaining power and control over another person, whether it's over them physically or over them emotionally or psychologically or all of the above. And so when one person is abusing another person spiritually, they tend to get power and control over the other person by using God or some sort of concept of some sort of spiritual power. So it's like abuse by proxy, by using God. Like, I don't want you to divorce me, right? But instead of like talking about divorce, well, God doesn't like divorce. God doesn't like your actions. God's going to send you to hell. God's going to punish you if you don't do certain things. It's not me, it's God. But I'm just going to twist scripture around, right? And to try to get you to do what I want you to do. That's spiritual abuse and that kind of stuff, because there's so many scriptures, especially, that can be twisted and taken out of context, that can really confuse a person. And like, oh, well, the Bible says that, you need to forgive and turn the other cheek. And, Jesus forgives. And, who you think you're better than Jesus, that you're not going to forgive. And, God, the Bible says that you should, love keeps no record of wrongdoings, but you're doing that. So I guess you're not a very good Christian, right? Or Muslim or Jewish person. And that kind of stuff just gets twisted around, and it's used to control somebody to be abused. It's terrible. Deborah says, my ex was a so-called Christian, but he was the same way. Yeah. And that it can be so difficult when you're in it to kind of find your way out of that. Let me see if I posted something in the group the other day about spiritual abuse. Let me see if I can find it real quick. My grandfather was a minister, and he was also a narcissist. And my mother grew up with a lot of awfulness, and it's interesting. Like I had so much anger at him for so long. And I think that at a young age, that really, it hindered me, really. I associated my grandfather with God. He was a man of God. And I just couldn't get past everything that he had done to my grandmother. And it really negatively impacted my ability to have a relationship with God. And I remember asking my mom when I was much older, probably in my 20s, I'm like, how do you believe in God when all of this happened to you? When it happened to your mom? My grandmother was such a wonderful, kind, just beautiful soul. Like you would have never guessed that she went through any pain in her life, and she went through a lot. And my mom had said that she made the decision that she wasn't going to let anybody keep her from God. And that just really was very eye-opening and made total sense. Like, yeah, just because because he was not of God. He twisted all of these scriptures to manipulate, and I think that's the worst thing about spiritual abuse, is it really does damage people's connection to a higher power. And for a lot of people, that's a really big part in their healing. And it's just, I think it's important. It goes back to that discernment. Just because a person says that they're Christian, just because they are a minister, just because, if their actions don't back that up, like that's where that discernment comes in. And it's like, you know what, you are a wolf in sheep's clothing, and you might say that you're all these things, but you're not. Like your actions, that, your tree is bearing different fruit than what you say that it is. Okay, I think I found that document. I dug up a bunch of Bible verses the other day because there was a gal in the support group that was really struggling with this. So here's a few of them. See, Hosea 14:9. Who is wise? Let them realize these things. Who is discerning? Let them understand. The ways of the Lord are right. The righteous walk in them, but the rebellious stumble in them. Then Hebrews 5:14. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Matthew 10:16. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. John 4:11. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world. I think that one is so true. Thessalonians 5:22. But test everything, hold fast what is good. John 7:24. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. So basically, using your discernment. Ephesians 4:14. So that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. So basically really being grounded and not being caught up in the whirlwinds of craftiness. Yes, Penelope, I agree. She says, though I like the one that says, do not throw your pearls before swine. Yeah, I'm going to have to add that one to my list. I agree. Deborah says, I am not religious at all, but I do believe in the Torah. I love it. Yeah, I don't really consider myself religious either. I consider myself to be more spiritual. I found a fantastic channel the other day on YouTube called Jews for Judaism. And it's this rabbi out of Canada. And he is absolutely fantastic. And there's a ton of videos in there. Some of the best insights into Judaism and the Torah and just kind of understanding, I don't know, like understanding God's word and the Old Testament. It's just, it's my new favorite channel. It's so interesting. He's like the Jordan Peterson of rabbis. Like he's just really, really good. Okay, let's see. Lori. Says, I'm 61 and was able to get away from my mother at 24, but like a scary movie, she got me in death via her will, suffered for 10 years and just feel empty. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. And yeah, it's going to be a process of healing and trying to just make peace with all of the injustice and the pain. Kiara says, what are some ways to begin to affirm myself rather than looking for affirmation from others? Well, there's, you can literally do affirmations. So if you're not familiar, I did a video a while back, and this is something, I don't know if Paul is here tonight, but Paul and I are working on creating some like guided meditation and like affirmation type videos. I made one a while back. It's called something like, let me see if I can find it real quick. Something about like affirmations and Um, Healing from complex PTSD. It's relaxation and affirmation video. I'll put the link in the chat here. So this video is, how long is this one? Like 35 minutes or so. And the first 5 or 10 minutes are about affirmations, you know, that you are enough, you are worthy, you are strong, there's so much right about you. It's just really affirming yourself. And the key with affirmations is to try to absorb them to where you believe that. And that can take some practice. So I guess to really focus on every single word. There's affirmations online, there's other videos out there with affirmations. Some people they like listening to affirmation videos. Some people like putting up like sticky notes with affirmations on their bathroom mirror, or putting them in their wallet and then kind of just looking at them, or keeping them in their purse and then looking at them throughout the day. You might want to keep, I had a stack of note cards, index cards by my bed when I was first going through this. And I just felt like I was in the fight for my life for keeping my head above water. I was so overwhelmed and just depressed. And I already struggle with depression as it is. So I was so scared of like what was going to come of me. And so I was throwing out all the stops. I had mantras, I had affirmations, I was feeding my brain as much positive stuff as I possibly could. I was avoiding watching stuff that would make me anxious or even more depressed. I was trying to really channel my pain into something positive. And if that meant, organizing my closet or walking my dog or doing some jumping jacks, like seriously, whatever, whenever, it just was these little ways of like reclaiming my life. And, with affirmations, I had a stack of index cards by my bed and I would flip through them last thing at night and then first thing in the morning. And I think I also for a while had a set in my wallet that I just carried around, the same affirmations, and I would flip through them if I was starting to feel low. And it really did help. It helped to just ground me in that moment and just realize like what you're going through. This is an event. This is not the event of your life. That this is an event in your life. That there will be life after this. So kind of keeping that perspective and moving forward, your future self is never going to look back on this time right now and think to yourself, boy, I really wish I would have worried about things more, or I really wish I would have been more anxious, or I wish I would have hated myself more. Like you're never going to look back and think any of that. So knowing that, then it's sort of like, okay, if I'm never going to think that, then I might as well start focusing on how can I make this time as tolerable as possible. I think, it can help by thinking about it of how can you just be as compassionate and nourishing to yourself as possible. Like really treating yourself like you're overcoming like a really, really bad cold. Like if you were really sick, if you were overcoming like mono or the flu or something, you would be extra good to yourself. You would be like, okay, I'm going to watch some movies this weekend, or I'm going to call a friend, or I'm going to take a hot bath. I'm going to just eat some of my favorite foods if I even feel like eating. I'm just going to be extra good to myself, right? And it's the same thing with this. Like you've been through a lot. And you deserve to triple up on your self-care right now. Your future self will thank you for it. Your future self's going to look back and be like, man, I'm so glad that I did these little nourishing things for myself. I really wish I would have done more of that. but I'm so glad that I did take care of myself in these ways. Like, good, yay me for doing that. Zachary says, yeah, self-care was a game changer for me. Yeah. Really? Deborah, I am going to have to find that. She says, I love affirmations. She says, I have an app downloaded on my phone and they pop up every morning for me at 7 a.m. because I get up early. Yes, I love that. I am going to have to write that down. I would enjoy that as well. Yeah, it's just feeding your brain kind of words. It's amazing the power that words can have, even if we're telling it to ourselves, of just, again, like Angie, that live stream that we did last week where she was talking about, paying attention, like noticing some of these strengths about you. There's so much power in that, realizing, okay, I am, like I'm legit, like I am creative, or I am determined, I am resilient, and then owning it, like I am resilient, I am determined, I am strong, I am in tune with myself, I trust my judgment. Or if some of these things don't feel 100% true and you're having trouble saying them, like it feels like you're being inauthentic by saying that. Some people will say, just keep saying it and you'll step into it. Sometimes I find if I soften the affirmation a little bit, then that can help. Like, so saying something, like if you don't trust your judgment, for example, to say something like, every day in every way, I'm trusting my judgment more and more. So something that still feels like within the realm of your truth, but still empowering enough that you're like, that's where I want to be, Dusk asks, is it possible for a narcissist to not know what they are? Oh, yeah. I mean, if they've always been like this, if they've always been like this, then, I mean, it's hard. It's hard for anybody to say what a normal level of like any emotion is, right? Because we don't really, it's hard to compare. Like, it's hard to compare how we might feel to how somebody else might feel. Like, we can kind of gauge what a normal level of compassion is, but it's such a relative thing. So there's a very solid chance that they might feel a little bit different, but I think it's that level of entitlement that kind of wins over, where they just, like they are how they are. I don't know, everybody in general, I think, has their own level of entitlement, or not entitlement, self-awareness, as far as their own behavior goes. And it's hard. I think it's hard for anybody to see. I think it's hard for any of us to see our own issues. It's always so much easier to see stuff in other people, right? So I think that's at play too with them. And then the added challenge is if they think they do no wrong, and then they really don't see anything. Courtney, I'm sorry, was talking and I did not see your question or your live stream donation. So I apologize for not addressing that sooner. Thank you for the live stream donation. She asks, my mom is a narcissist. How do I deal with it and heal? Well, I would say for starters, there's some support groups that are specific to daughters of narcissistic mothers that I would encourage you to join. There's groups on Facebook, and then there's groups off of Facebook. If you're going to be joining groups on that topic or on this topic in general on Facebook, just make sure that you keep your groups private, because then if they're if they're not private, then other people in your friend circle on Facebook can see what groups you're in, and people can be nosy. And if they're family and they want to see, they're just nosy and bored and gossipy and all that. So just something to be aware of. But, and that's such a big question, is kind of moving forward and healing from that. I would say as far as like dealing with it would be boundaries, big time boundaries, and just realizing that you're an adult and that even though she might use a lot of like guilt and obligation and fear and all of these things to try to kind of puppeteer you and to just even be really domineering and these kinds of things, like, you're an adult now and it's okay to say no. She's not going to like it. And she's going to get upset and she's going to hold it against you. And she's going to tell you that you're manipulative and controlling and mean and all of these things. But the only way to do damage control is to really start setting some boundaries. And so I would encourage you to start reading up on different ways to set boundaries, kind of what healthy boundaries look like. There's a lot of different books on there about daughters with narcissistic mothers. And that can be very validating, I think, for that kind of behavior, of what just your experience in general. And then moving forward and healing, I guess it depends on kind of what part is still there. So for some people with healing, it might be getting, her voice, like that critical parent voice, out of your head, and realizing that all that voice of like, what you should do and that you're worthless and that, you're stupid, bad, ugly, blah, 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 right? All of that kind of crap, realizing that's not your voice, that's her voice. And so working towards separating out that voice and just shutting it down and just saying, you know what, enough. Like, enough, you're boring. I've heard all the same stuff over and over and over again for decades. Like, I'm over it, So like, you're not welcome here. And then really working on the positive self-talk and affirming yourself, so doing the affirmations like we were talking about, and building on your strengths and getting like a healthy, reasonable understanding of yourself. And not seeing yourself through the eyes of a narcissist mom. Okay. So with that said, we are going to be over on time. We're close. So let's take some time and wind down and do our guided meditation for the night. And then we'll wrap it up. So if you have some time, let's take some time to just get comfortable. And this is your time. So if you are driving, you might want to pull over. If you are in your home, if you're in bed or in a chair, just getting as comfortable as you possibly can. Start by closing your eyes. And taking some deep breaths in through your nose and exhaling out through your mouth. Allowing yourself to be fully present in this moment. Realizing that it's okay to relax, to be fully present in your body. And turning your attention inward. how you can feel your heartbeat. Realizing that all of the amazing things that your body does every second of every moment of every day, it's restoring itself in physical ways and emotional ways and psychological ways, in both big and small ways. Every moment of every day, you are healing in many different ways every single day. And now bringing your attention to the top of your forehead and relaxing your forehead and your eyes, your cheeks, and your jaw, allowing your jaw to relax and fall open, and letting your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Relaxing your neck all the way around the back of your neck. Your shoulders, allowing them to drop down and back. Allowing your chest to open. And then in this moment, you are safe. You are here. You are turning inward and being present with yourself. Relaxing your chest, your stomach, and your hips. Allowing your legs to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable for you. Relaxing your thighs, your knees, your calves, your feet. Allowing them to fall in whatever position is the most comfortable for you. Relaxing your shoulders, your upper arms, your elbows, your forearms, and your hands. Feeling the heaviness of your body as you are completely relaxed. Now let's take a few moments. Let's visualize a waterfall. Whatever that waterfall looks like to you. Perhaps the water is crystal clear. Perhaps it's sparkling in silver. Or perhaps it's a beautiful blue color. If you listen closely, you can hear the water as it's gushing over the top, splashing down below. It's beautiful, wondrous, roaring water. It's just beckoning to you. And now let's visualize walking towards that waterfall, knowing that as soon as this water hits you, it's going to wash so much negativity and anxiety and stress away. And allowing that water to splash onto your face and the top of your head, It's cool, it's comforting, it's cleansing. It slowly is just washing away all of that anxiety and pain and fear. You can almost feel it restoring and cleansing your body at almost a cellular level. It just feels so amazing. Now slowly continue to make your way through that waterfall, letting that water just cascade over every single inch of your skin. And as you come through on the other side, noticing how much lighter you feel, as all of the weight of the world has just been washed off. And that this is your highest and best self. This is your healthiest self. Reminding yourself that in every moment of every day, you are getting stronger and stronger, that you are healing, that you can do this, that you've come such a long way, that you are wise, you are intuitive, and that there are so many things that are right about you. That the realization that you are now starting to see your worth, and that you are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect, that you are beautifully and wonderfully made, just the way you are. There is no mistake. There's so much right about you. Now let's take a moment. Visualize a white light in the center of your chest. It could be any size that you want. Perhaps it's small, like the grain of sand, but perhaps it's larger, like a golf ball or a softball. Whatever size light that you start off with, that's completely fine. And for the next 7 breaths, to visualize that light growing bigger inside of you. It's this pureness, this pure, amazing, white, healing light. And as it touches every single cell in your body, it just beautifully and compassionately restores every single cell in your body. So let's start our breaths now. Having that light grow larger and larger. Connecting us to all that is good and right in the world. Having that light travel down your arms, down into your stomach, down into your hips, and your thighs, and your legs. Easily and effortlessly moving around every single cell in your body, restoring and healing you, connecting you to everything that is good and right in the world and everything that is good and right in yourself. Connecting you to your inner wisdom. Reconnecting you with your authentic self. And when you're ready, go ahead and come on back. Give yourself a really big, energetic hug. Just acknowledging how far you've come and that you are a warrior, that you really are, that you are so incredibly resilient, and that you're doing a great job. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. So thank you guys so much for joining us. This Wednesday and every Wednesday, we're here, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And let me know what you thought about the beginning of the live stream and if that's something that you want to keep doing. And if you guys have any affirmations that you'd like for me to put into these live streams or make into a recording, or if you come across any articles or anything that's thriving related, let me know. And we'll go from there. Thank you, Missouri Cowboy, for the live stream donation. I appreciate it. So, yeah. Good deal. I'm glad you guys like the ending meditation. It's, I like to do them. So that works out well. I'm glad. Okay. You guys have a fantastic night. As always, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a wonderful rest of your week. Good night.